Now, the Turnbull government's plan to drug test welfare recipients is continuing to make headlines this week.
While some have argued testing is an effective way to identify and treat drug addiction, a group of medical professionals say the measures will simply fuel crime and drive social division. Well, to discuss this and more, we're joined this morning by Rebecca Burdick, Policy Manager of Workforce Skills at the New South Wales Business Chamber, and Katie Acheson, Chief Executive of Youth Action. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Wonderful to have you with us. Thank you so much. All right, well, let's start then with this measure, the trial, which will be conducted in Logan in Queensland, in Western Sydney, and of course also in Mandurah in Western Australia. And Rebecca, we're having a lot of different arguments around the proposed benefits and possible harm that may in fact be incurred. And I suppose people also pointing to international examples of what's already happened with these sorts of trials.
Well, I think there's a couple of first principles that we need to consider. So first of all, the purpose of New Start or any other form of welfare is to be a temporary measure to tide somebody over before they obtain full-time or some kind of employment. So that's the first thing. It's a temporary form of payment. It's not there as a permanent solution. Secondly, taking drugs or illicit drugs, non-medicated drugs, is illegal. So it's something that we're not supposed to be, a behaviour that we're not supposed to be engaging with. And there's many professions where people are drug tested. So anybody who's operating a train, anybody who's working in a variety of different risky occupations is drug tested. I guess the other important thing to remember is that this is a trial. So the government has made it very clear that this is not something that's going to be rolled out nationwide tomorrow. It's something that's being trialled in two very specific locations that have very specific issues with addiction. So I'm not saying that this is maybe the best possible solution for solving addiction issues and also providing a bit of a solution for, I guess, the cycle of dependency that welfare can support, but it is a trial that may lead to some positive results. And we've seen that with the cashless card trial. I think we saw some results yesterday that were very positive. They're rolling that out in the goldfields. I think it was something like 40% of families were finding that they had spent their money better and were better able to support their children under that scheme. So they were encouraging results. I'm not sure if they're directly applicable to the new trial, the drug testing trial, but it's something that we should be watching very carefully.
Yeah, Katie, interesting parallels there that Rebecca makes between that cashless card and the welfare testing. I can see that you have your doubts, but I mean, is it fair enough?
Is it clear on my face that I might not necessarily agree with that analysis?
I mean, what is the answer then? If you don't go down this route, as far as getting those people who may have an addiction problem, for instance, into work,
right, how
do you help them?
Well, we're talking about a health issue. So drug addiction is a health issue, and we should have a health response to a health issue. This is not, drug addiction is not about income support. This is about what is going on for a person and behavioural issues. So you can't cut somebody's small, like $38 a day, you can't cut that and say, this is going to help you change your entire life and deal with long-term behavioural issues. This is not an issue about social security. This is about health. So we need to have a health response to this. So the government has tied in some measures within this to say people can get into a drug treatment program, will help them, but they're not actually saying what's going to happen if there's not any options available. So we have really long wait times for drug dependency and addiction support services throughout the region, and there's already long wait times, and yet what we're doing is forcing more people into it. And actually the evidence is very clear that there is no evidence for this trial. It didn't work in New Zealand, it is a waste of money, and it's punitive. We are stigmatizing people who are struggling to find work and giving them labels. It is a bad idea.
Well, I guess the important thing to remember is their welfare is not being cut. They will still receive the New Start allowance or whatever other form of welfare they're on. They'll just receive 80% of it on a cashless card. So we're not talking about cutting off benefits to people who demonstrate addiction issues. We're talking about helping them to prioritise their money toward the things that matter, toward their basic needs, instead of spending welfare to support an addiction issue. You talked about the things that work. I agree, this is a trial. We don't know whether this is actually going to work in terms of decreasing drug dependency issues. things that we know that work. There's an example in Western Sydney. Productivity Boot Camp is an 8-week venture that involves an employability program, young people with addiction issues, young people from domestic violence environments and contexts participate in that program, and I guess get those basic employability skills, literacy, numeracy, construction skills that move them onto a job. I would like to see the government invest in more industry-led solutions like Productivity Boot Camp, and there's other examples in Victoria, I think, as well. I'd like to see government investment in those initiatives and not necessarily on these kinds of trials. But I think it's a wait and see.
Exactly what you're saying is that we need to help people into work. So this trial isn't about helping people into work. It's about punishing people who might have an addiction problem. And we're not talking about addiction. We're talking about testing positive for a drug. So that's a very different thing. So if the government wants to help people who are struggling with addiction, that's fantastic. It is a great way to put more money into the communities to put supports there. If that's going to happen, that's great. But what we really need to be seeing in income support, like welfare and job seekers, is programs that are helping people into work, not pushing them away and taking away their $38 and making it to be $32 or $31 to live on a day. This is going to push more people into crisis, and it is not going to be the answer.
Is there actually any evidence, though? I mean, we've heard concerns that some people may, in fact, take up other activities, either prostitution or in being involved in dealing in drugs as a response to that. Is there any evidence that that sort of behaviour actually does take place?
I think it's an assumption. If you don't have access to the money to be able to pay your rent and to feed yourself, what are you going to do? You have to find a way to have, food in your belly and a roof over your head. So people are going to be forced into really vulnerable situations. I think it's really interesting that we are copying New Zealand, which had less than 0.5% actually tested positive, and they spent millions of dollars testing all of these people, and less than 1% of people actually tested positive. So if we're looking at solutions, let's look at ones that work. Let's get some figures where we're seeing a much bigger response.
The aim, of course, is to get people into work, certainly young people, at the same time. And that leads us to the point of skills training and apprenticeships, and it's National Skills Week is ahead of us. Do you feel as though there's been a lot of talk about whether perhaps apprenticeships have been wound back? There's not enough government support there. What's your feeling, Rebecca, about as far as where we're at as far as encouraging people into apprenticeships?
Well, I think at the moment we're seeing that the VET system overall, the vocational education training system of which apprenticeships are a part, is in crisis. It's absolutely in crisis mode at the moment. We've seen a dramatic decline in young people and people across the workforce participating in those structured pathways to work. I think over the past 5 years alone, it's gone down by something like 30%, which is very, very alarming. National Skills Week is a real opportunity to put those kinds of qualifications on the agenda. I think a lot of people might not realise that an apprenticeship or a traineeship delivers much better job outcomes at the end than going to university. I think we have a real opportunity to highlight those positive stories now. We have a real opportunity to reverse that decline. I was a bit surprised. I had a little look at the news this morning, just like I do every morning, and I thought there's not a lot of coverage about National Skills Week, and it actually is something that should be of great concern for everybody, because vocational education training, particularly apprenticeships and traineeships, are the key incubator of our skilled workforce. We know that something like, I think it's more than 70% of young people don't go to university straight after school. Where are they going? We hope that they're going into a vocational pathway to work. So I'm really pleased that we are talking about that issue this morning.
Well, it's particularly significant when we take into account the numbers of unemployment affecting younger people as well. So how are you seeing this, being someone who's so well connected with the Youth Action Network and where young people are at? What do you think might be the outcome of this sort of situation?
Well, as Rebecca said, I think the VET program is so important, and we have seen it being degraded over the last sort of 5-10 years. And what we know really clearly is that this idea of one job for life that, used to be around when some of us went to school is not the truth anymore. Young people need skills for the future workforce, and not only just for now and when they graduate, but also for 10 years, because it's going to change. So it's about skills and not necessarily one career. So most young people will have at least 17 jobs in their life and 5 different careers. So preparing young people to go into a university system that's only going to prepare them for one particular job, that we know that that's not the answer for the future of the workforce and what the world's going to look like. And so many young people are coming out of university or coming out of school and not being able to find a job. It's taking them far too long to get a full-time job. We need to be looking at the systems that we have in place, the education system, and including VET, and saying how can we prepare young people for the future of work and the skills that they need to do that.
I mean, you are talking about flexibility in the workforce, and I guess that's part of the government's argument as far as restructuring that and perhaps giving employers more rights as far as hiring and firing is concerned?
Interesting, but I think it is about when we look at what a job looks like for now and for the future, it is changing, and industry have a lot to say about what it should look like. I think we need to, what can we do to put things in place to protect, particularly for us, obviously young people, getting their foot in the door and being able to continue on in their career and get opportunities, but also how do we make sure that industry has what it needs to get those young people through that door in the first place?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the circuit breaker for that is ensuring that young people participate in education after school and that they have opportunities for experiential learning in a school context. So at the moment, what we're finding is that the school system is not gearing young people up for work after they finish, and university isn't either. They need to have more opportunities at school to participate in vocationally relevant training, and that's what National Skills Week is all about. It's promoting the real importance of engaging in work-relevant training, and I think we need to see more of that happening in a school context.
Well, we did want to continue our theme of the youth.
Yes, we're focusing on those young folk because they're also coming out in droves when it comes to the same-sex marriage postal survey, and we've seen an incredible take-up in people registering, young people aged 18 to 24. What do you think this signals? Are we presuming too much to think that it's going to tip things in favour of a yes vote? Because, I mean, how do we predict?
What we need to celebrate is the fact that young people are so actively and wanting to be actively engaged in our democracy. I think there's a bit of an assumption that young people are disengaged from politics. It's totally not true. The 65,000 young people who enrolled to vote in a 2-week period in the postal vote, it's not about the yes or no. Essentially, it's about I want to be part of democracy, I want to have my voice heard. And young people's voices are really important in elections. They are the swing vote. They're the ones who go with issues, and you can win their vote over. So I think it's a bit of a wake-up call for the government to say, actually, young people are really, they're getting more and more engaged with us. They want us to answer the questions and the issues that they care about most, and we have a responsibility to do that. This postal vote is just a test for the next election.
I think that's interesting. Okay. I mean, Rebecca, do you feel as though all political parties are doing enough to connect with young voters?
I'm not sure they're all doing enough to connect with young voters, because it's just been shown that the past week has brought another 90,000 young people on the electoral roll, and I don't really think that it's our political parties that's caused that to happen. I think it's groups like Youth Action. Katie came up with some pretty cool videos over the past week encouraging young people to enrol to vote. What I do think is that it definitely shows us that even in a compulsory voting system, we're not attracting enough parts of the community to participate and to really, I guess, take advantage of that immense opportunity they have to have a voice in political life. I think it absolutely is a call to action to all of our political parties. I think the Liberal Party in particular needs to really ramp up its efforts to engage with more young people. So does the Nationals as well, but definitely the Liberal Party, I can say, I think should do more to attract more young people to join their ranks. The Labor Party and the Greens seem to have quite an active campaign at the moment to get more people involved. I think we need to see the same from the Conservative parties.
But we also had an Ipsos poll that said it's about a third for Labor, Liberal, Greens, and there's a lot of assumptions that young people only vote left, and that is not true. Young people vote on the issues that they care about. So the Liberals absolutely could win the next election and could win it if they started talking about issues that young people cared about and started genuinely engaging with young people. So we need to get that Minister for Youth back. We need to have a national voice that for young people like AAC representing those young people into Parliament, but we're not seeing that kind of engagement yet. I think this is a tiny turning of the tide.
Yeah, and you mentioned that as far as getting young people into Parliament. I mean, is that an issue for both of you?
Absolutely.
That clearly there isn't that representation there at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't want, I hate using this catchphrase now, but we don't want to continue with a pale, male and stale Parliament. Absolutely not. We need to have more people under 40 representing us. We need to have more people under 40 as MPs. I think that our Parliament should be representative of the broader community. I'm not sure that it is at the moment. I don't think that that's something that you can solve via quotas, for example. I know that's something that people talk about, but I think it is about ministers, MPs, the whole of government really looking at the entire community and making sure that they represent them. So parties, I think, if the Liberal Party, for instance, wanted to attract more young people, then why not try and get more young people pre-selected that's
you know, it's
one
about
way that they can
representation,
start.
but it's also about talking to young people. And I think the mechanisms for a politician to actually engage with young people and talk to them, those things have kind of whittled away with the removal of funding for the National Peak and the removal of the Minister for Youth. So we have seen a couple of things that have kind of worked against the government from actually being a little bit in touch with young people. And I think now is a chance for the government to really engage with young people and go, what are the issues you care about? What are you going to vote on? Because actually, you better watch out. You might not actually get in next year because you're not, well, the year after, depending on the day. You might not get in if you're not talking to young people.
All right, well, it will be fascinating
Well,
to
in
see
fact,
how
there may be a few more openings in Parliament, given the dual citizenship.
Maybe some young people,
Right.
maybe some Indigenous young people.
Yeah, we haven't quite got there just yet. We'll come back to that. Rebecca Burdick and Katie Acheson, wonderful to have you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.